Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session of Career in Change Management on Mark Change Leader Forum. We are not alone in our change struggles. That's the motto with which the Mark Change Leader team was formed. And in our series, we've had eminent change personalities from the industry speaking about their experience and their journey in change and change management. Today, we have Nayona with us. Nayona is the global practice leader at Cargill, who is in charge of organization design, change management, and strategic workforce planning. Her career spans across human capital, both in consulting and in the industry. She has headed both delivery teams as well as capability building ones, and always brings new things, new approaches in managing her clients and stakeholders. She's a constant learner and can always be found either reading or watching a webinar. Today, welcome to you, Nayona, because today we will have something to learn from you.
Thank you, Sudeshna. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share whatever I can.
Brilliant. So the series we started on career in change management because we were seeing people in the industry who were like, a little hesitant to take this as a full-time role because it was always a part of the roles in which they were performing. So currently, how do you see change management as like in the landscape of change management in the organizations?
Yeah, Sudeshna, great question. I think what's apparent to me, especially in the last few years, is that change management, and this is not news to anyone, right? I think it's become even more important in the last few years, especially through the pandemic and the constantly evolving economic uncertainty that we are experiencing, right? So in these kind of environments, employee engagement, whether it's with or without the impetus of any transformation, is change management is seen as something that's very critical for employee engagement.
Exactly.
Digital and technology integration and modernization, that's still a big need, and it will continue to need change experts, right? Organizations that are using this time to focus on things that are aligned with their strategic shifts like sustainability, DEIB, return to office, or whatever, return to work, or whatever that looks like, right? Major org shifts because you're changing your strategy or your go-to market. All of these things are very much, things that will demand change management as a skill, and that too in a very agile and iterative way. So I think change management, the landscape, the opportunities, it's very rich, right? So there's, I think, a great demand for that skill right now. A lot of another thing I wanted to call out is what I'm also seeing is what within Cargill, but also in general, right? You're seeing a lot around HRBP 2.0, right? So a lot of organizations are working on evolving the role of the HR business partner as a more strategic partner. So not only is the demand higher than ever before for the typical change practitioner profile, but I think it's overall higher need for the skill beyond that profile. And I think it's just a good place to be right now.
True. I mean, as you said, change has always been an
Yeah,
integral part of the strategic HR roles, but change becoming the more important thing, I think this, as you said, the
exactly.
right thing to be a part of now. So as we spoke of skills, so coming from there, what do you think, should be the skills of a change manager and this capability as building it within your organization? You are now in the industry.
Yeah.
So what are the skills of a change manager you would look at, and will that be different if it is from an external consultant?
Got it. Yeah, no, I don't think the skills are going to be that different based on whether you are internal or external. At least that's my point of view. Okay, it depends really on the type of change management engagement you're in and the type of change management you want to be a specialist at. I think that's where the nature of the skills will differ, right? So if you're looking at, let's say, high complexity transformations, digital, behavioral, operational, if you look at those as some of the types, knowing and being proficient in a market leading methodology like prosci's ADKAR, right, is one part of it. That is very fundamental. It's foundational. I think anyone who wants to be in the change management space needs to have a solid grounding in a methodology, right? And one that is relatable to most of, whether it's an internal client or an external client, you have to be good at being able to execute against that. So it's something that every practitioner will need to have in their toolbox. Then, of course, there is depth and breadth of experience. I think over time, gaining those getting exposed to different types of projects is something that will only build and enhance that knowledge that you have around methodology, right? Some may choose to do only digital type of change, right? So your ERP implementation. Some may choose to do more behavioral type of change. So that's when things to start get a little different in terms of where you need to build your skills. So depth of business knowledge, now that's again a universal one, right? If you're a change practitioner, what will differentiate you from someone who's really good at facilitating the use of a methodology versus giving a nuanced solution to your client, requires that level of business knowledge and that curiosity to understand what is going on with the business, what is the problem statement, what are you trying to solve for. So I think somewhere there, strong consultative skills comes into the picture, right? So I think that's another one. And then I think finally keeping in touch with what's new and interesting, and you'll hear me say this a bunch of times through our conversation, is what I think knowing different, aside from what is tried and tested and what we all know and have experience doing around, the change impact and the stakeholder assessment and all of those things, when it comes to the actual interventions, it's always good to have a view of what's actually going to work, what is fit for purpose for this situation, instead of kind of just doing the typical change comms, like the deliverables that everyone is used to doing. So for example, me in my role as a capability leader in Cargill, right? One of the things that I'm looking at is innovation in the change management space, right? So when you start to do that research, when you're starting to read up, everything isn't new as such, right? Like obviously AI is the big thing right now, and we're looking at ways of seeing how AI can be used to enhance change management, but also what are some of those other frameworks that are outside of the methodology that you use, which will enhance the human experience, right? So where sometimes, and especially in this environment when there's a lot of restructuring happening and a lot of perhaps headcount action happening, how do you do that in the most humane and human centric way possible?
Exactly.
I think that kind of skill set, knowing what's out there, what's good in terms of, like, there are so many thought leaders in the space, knowing different perspectives and how people are doing it differently, that's part of it, right? Like that's part of your skill building that you must absolutely focus on, whether it's in-house, external, digital, behavioral, it won't matter, right? It'll differentiate you from being a good applicator of method to a great change management professional. So that's what I think in terms of skills.
I think very well put together, Nayona. I mean, it's so true, because when we experience this from the other side when doing sessions, and we say, like, give us examples or give us case studies.
Yeah.
We give it with a lot of caution, because we know one size will not fit all, right? As you correctly said, that it is not about it is not about that knowing the thing, but will it be landing, will it be working, will it be like how the nuances of the culture, the nuances of the people, will the same solution which like clicked elsewhere will not make click here. So you cannot copy paste, you have to be innovative, you have to use it. So yeah, bang on, I would say. And yes, very, very important. And it is not just applying and going ahead with the project. You need to be very much involved and understand the business, and as the depth of knowledge and curious about what's going on, and that may change itself, right?
That
So
will change constantly. I mean, If strategy is something that is constantly evolving and a moving target, so should our change approach, right? Because everything we do in change or org design or any of these things is always, like if you're thinking about Galbraith star model as the basis for what we do, right? It's all hooked on strategy. So if strategy changes, our approach changes, our interventions change. So you have to keep moving with it. So agility is important. But the other thing I wanted to also quickly mention about, again, the skills, related to the skills of the change practitioner. Something I find that it's important to keep a very good balance of is keeping a balance of the science of change management versus the art, right?
Yeah.
And both are equally important.
You need to
If you
customize. I mean, you
if
can.
you over index on one, if you for example, the most common thing that we've seen, right? A person knows the methodology, is really in tune with, you know, what is required from a human experience, tend to over index on the art, the softer side of change, right? And so then some of the scientific parts of it get lost, and so you stop being quantifiable about what you're trying to do, you stop being deliberate about what you're trying to do, you're over indexing on the emotions of it. So I think keeping that right balance of science and art is extremely important as well.
Yeah, I completely understand what you are saying, and it's so important, right? And the whole again, one thing you said just kind of stuck with me was you were talking about the human experience.
Hmm.
It's not about rolling a change anymore, right? It is about that experience. It is, and it is so many times the changes are happening. You have to make the experience worth it, right? Everybody is making that effort to shift.
Yeah.
So that is something I think we don't think from that angle, that what would be the experience be, right?
Yeah.
True, absolutely. So we understand change is so many changes going on. Change management is important. And I feel the shift made in the industry or with consulting companies is to build that
Hmm.
capability, or in a project that support should be there. But still, we are observing that it is still at a project level that you put in change management. When we talk about change management, building it as a capability, we are still seeing organizations hesitating to invest in that. Do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you somewhat. I think it's nothing new that I'm going to share with you. I think we are doing a lot in Cargill for sure in investing in that in capability building. I know a lot of other organizations globally are doing the same thing, right? Building COEs that are very much focused on change amongst other organizational capabilities, right? But I think as with most capability building efforts go, right? The one thing that you'll see common is until it is seen as a strategic investment, that it has the, and this is again pure play change management, right? You need a sponsor, right? If you don't have a sponsor, if it is not seen as strategic, if it is not a priority, right? It will not get done, period, right? And we learn the same thing when we talk about the case for change and things like that, right? So orgs that want to build capability, like the intent is there, it's but there's always, that, how do I put it, like a tension between how do we focus our efforts, meaning resources, cost, and time, towards business as usual, right? Which is
Yeah.
revenue generating activities
Yes.
or revenue generating support activities, versus anything that does not give you that short term revenue result, right? So there's that short term, long term, tussle that keeps happening. And so
Yeah.
organizations really struggle with that. Where do we put our resources, money, and time, right? Do we focus it on getting stuff done, which is those big transformations, the big hairy transformations, and deploy people consistently on that? Or do we allocate a certain number of resources which is not going to generate, immediate value, so to speak, on this, on a 3-year capability roadmap, right? So I think that becomes the challenge. I think that's what most organizations struggle with. Of course, cost is a big one, right? Like cost to build capability is never low, right? So if you are building a capability, whether it is from scratch or whether you're higher up in the capability maturity um, curve, right? And there's lesser of a gap to close, it's still going to cost you money, right?
Yeah.
It's going to cost you money. It's going to be an investment. So then it becomes about, does the organization, is this the right time for the organization to make that investment? And then, sometimes some organizations take much longer to make that investment and say, yes, this is something that we absolutely cannot do without any longer, right? In order for us to grow, in order for us to be successful, we simply cannot wait to make this investment anymore. Versus those who are like, you know what, I don't have the money for it right now. So what
Mm.
I'll do instead is, instead of building capability in house, let me pull in some external consultants who can come and help us with these short term project needs, where I can do some, get the work going, get the
Okay.
work happening, but I don't have the capability in house, so I'll get it from the outside. So I think it's very normal, it's very typical, it's very standard. I do see investments are less likely to be made in right now for obvious reasons, because of the economic environment, but um, again, organizations that see it as a strategic priority will continue to invest.
Okay. So, so sponsor is needed, intent is
100%.
needed, and that combination of that right time, or I think the entire leadership or the entire organization treating as this is what will help us get the
Yes,
level of revenue. I think if that gets kind of linked, then you
exactly.
do that investment. Then it is
Exactly.
not a big investment for you. So yeah, completely like aligned with you on that. So uh, since you come from the HR perspective, people, I think, working with people is natural. It is viewed as very natural. And hence, sometimes the people side of the change comes on HR. So,
Hmm.
do you see like roles in HR which you feel like, they are more tuned in to, say, change management or adopting this change manager role?
Um, so I want to answer that question a little differently. I'll definitely talk about the HR roles, which is
Mhm.
what you're asking about, but I think it's getting broader than that also,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
And
Mhm.
so I think that's where there is an opportunity that was different from how we got into change, for example, right? So it's no longer, like I said, right, no longer just the change practitioner in the COE or the CMO, whatever it is, right? There is people in like the HRBPs, right? In Kargil right now, there's a big effort right now to enable our HRBPs to be doing change management on a day-to-day basis. I'll give you a very simple example to kind of substantiate what I just said, right? Think about the typical HRBP who's been handed they've gotten their engagement survey results, right? For the year, the annual engagement survey, you've gotten the results, you're seeing lower scores in certain areas. Let's say the lower score is currently in rewards and recognition, right?
Mhm.
Um, you look at that and you try to then get into that consultative space where you're like, okay, why is this happening? Like you dig into the data a little bit and you say, it's maybe one of two things, right? One is maybe there isn't a formal rewards and recognition process or system in place. That's possibility number one, or
Mhm.
example number one. The second one could be that, hey, the culture amongst our supervisors is not one that, uh, it takes, is hinged on a rewards and recognition kind of culture, right? Like the supervisor might just not be doing that often enough, right? Doing the regular day to day kind of recognition. So then, as an HRBP, you need to make the case for why that should change, right? It's
Mhm.
not just enough to say, hey, the engagement scores are low, but you then go further to define that. Then you go into managing your stakeholders around making some changes around that. That could be at your business level, it could be at a more organizational level, depending on what your problem statement is. So you're going through that entire process that you would in a typical change role, right?
Mm.
Now, like you said at the beginning of our conversation, a lot of us have been doing it as a part of our role. Some part of our role has these elements of change to it. I think it's more formal now. I think you actually need
Yeah.
to know the methods, the tools, the frameworks. You need to be equipped and enabled to run a proper change project instead of just doing it in intuitive manner, which, this is all logic, so let me do it in a way that's logical. I think you have to be a little more deliberate, a little more, planful about doing change management. So I think HRBP is the
So
big
that.
one. But at
Mhm.
the same time, look at, like I'm in an environment where we have in Kargil, we have multiple COEs, right? I'm in strategy and transformation. There are other COEs around talent and development, total rewards, etc. Now we have a model where, we are very close to the business. Our model keeps us very close to the business, the way we are structured, the way we perform our work. Now, like there are consultants and advisors in our team who do OD change SWP, there are similar, consultants and advisors in other COEs as well. And sometimes they're doing, let's say, for example, let's say it's a performance management um, update to our performance management process, for example. Right? Um, to be able to do that, yes, you are an expert at performance management, but you also know change management, right? To
Yeah,
roll those changes out, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, and so I think the COEs also need to be able to do a certain level of change management. So that's your HR space, right? You're looking at HRBPs, you're
Yes.
looking at COEs, and all of that. But then think about outside of HR, right? There are so many things that business leaders are tackling right now, which would require that not just change leadership, right? Change leadership is a given,
Oh,
but
you're
I
just
think change management as a skill is also required, right? So if you look at things like sustainability, or any CSR type of work, or DEI, right?
yeah,
You won't always, for those smaller interventions or smaller projects, you won't necessarily get the support from an HR person or a change practitioner necessarily. And maybe there's more value in you as a business leader to be running those things yourself, right? If it's a small
yeah,
scale,
yeah,
quick
because those small
intervention.
things will
Yeah.
be the bigger tomorrow. Yeah.
Exactly. So then it's that much more valuable for them to also know, for business leaders to also know how to do change management. And it doesn't have to be the end-to-end thing that a
Yeah.
practitioner or an expert would
Mhm.
do. It doesn't mean like you create the big stakeholder assessment and then the big impact assessment. But knowing that those steps are important to get to an outcome in a very planned manner, is something it's an important skill to have. So I think it's broader than just HR right now.
I completely agree. And I think these groups which you spoke of, like change is becoming business as usual for them. So hence, like as you say, that it has become more formalized, and hence change management is becoming integrated not only to the people facing roles, but other roles where, yeah, that will soon be a part, as how well you do that change is
Yeah,
becoming very, very important. So
absolutely.
so when you hire in these roles, or when you take people in these roles, uh, like I can preempt what would you say, but still, like, like in these candidates, what you see are lacking. What would you say that to make a complete change manager, what is the thing you find most missing?
Curiosity. And you've heard me say this before as well, right? I think a lot of people who are in the change space, and what I'm finding even in the change space for a very long time, some longer than I have been, right? I think where I find that there is a gap there, there's a comfort zone, that I know this methodology and I know how to apply it to any situation, and I know
Mhm.
how to facilitate workshops to achieve the outcomes that we agree upon. But what I find is missing is, how do you tweak this? How do you make this nuanced based on the problem statement? How do you ask the right questions to get to that right problem statement? I find that sometimes is lacking, right? So, for example, right, are you spending time being, reading up? Are you there are so many great webinars out there on change management, so many different points of view, right? Neuro Leadership Institute does a whole bunch of things. um, Dr. Leandro Herrero does a few things, right? There are lots of people out there who do some, great webinars. What are you doing to keep yourself up to date on how do you quantify change using change tech? How is AI going to help you, right? Does the
Mhm.
company, for example, if you're an external consultant and you find out that the company does use certain AI tools, how can you leverage that to enhance the change experience? What change journeys look like, right? Are you trying to learn, for example, right, The Art of Engagement is a book by Jim Horden. Are you looking at that and trying to see how you can apply some of those techniques or interventions in a change management scenario, right? So I think that curiosity, the desire to learn beyond what is
What
the
I know.
standard, beyond the template,
Mm-hmm.
I find that to be the biggest challenge. And I don't know if it's because people, I mean, capacity and time is definitely one thing, but also I don't know if people are just aware that that's
Yes.
something that they need to upskill themselves on continually.
Yes, it is. I agree so much to that, to the extent of saying, like, what you were saying, the curiosity, it is the effort, that every time an effort has to be put in. It's not that you've made something and that can go on. Every change is so different. Every change you need to make that effort, to what you are saying, like, this change will be different from the past one. Now, it may be the change is the same digitalization, but it's with a new group, it's with the new people. You have
The
to, like,
problem statement is different.
different. It is different. And that effort needed to kind of not relook at what we have done. I think a change management needs change management, right? So I think I think that comes out.
Absolutely.
So uh, and you are, in your experience, seeing that, as you said, OD and HRBPs, and here in the outside, the HR, the realm, the CSR, the strategy roles, as well as your the sustainability roles which are getting formed. They are actually making the shift to change management. They are making, right? You are
Yes.
seeing in
Yeah.
your experience. Okay, great. In terms of your what made you choose this as a specialization? So the question would be, you
Yeah.
also have the wide range of experience, and in consulting, then in the industry, so you have had your journey. So what makes you choose change management as a specialization?
Yeah, so I can't answer that question without getting into the journey a little bit, because
Yes.
there is kind of a logical flow to how I ended up in this space, right? So, like many Indians do, who are good at, like, math and science, I was destined to be an engineer to start with. And I truly believe that that was my path and my goal, and followed in the footsteps of my father, right? And finished my engineering degree, got into the job of doing, software development, realized that me and technology were not necessarily a match made in heaven. So I had to pivot quite quickly in after the first 2 years of my career in tech. And I actually thought I was going to go into do marketing, because what I was craving at the time was creativity, autonomy, range and variety, right? So I think my younger self was craving some of those things. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go do marketing, right? And I went to do my MBA. And while I was doing my MBA, I quickly realized that marketing is great as a job, but I think the lifestyle that goes along with it wasn't necessarily for me, right? So I then kind of fell into a internship, which was an L&D internship. I was extremely fortunate to work with some exceptional leaders and mentors during that internship in Bearing Point. They continue to be my mentors today, and I fell in love with L&D. And so then that's where the journey begins, right? And that journey is somewhat, I think, fairly similar for people in the industry right now in India and across the board, right? Most people start with like an L&D background. So I fell into L&D. Then when I got my full-time offer, I actually started with a strategic comms project. Again, I was again fortunate to have wonderful clients who let me learn and grow in my role. I had a great bunch of leaders to coach me along the way. So I'm extremely grateful for those formative years. But then after strategic comms was I came back into, I guess, training and education related to ERP implementations. Did that, kind of got proficient at it. Moved into innovative learning solutions, which is more on the the behavioral side of things. And then I reached this inflection point in my career where I'm like, do I choose depth in L&D, or do I choose breadth, right, and go up where the work really begins? And so I chose breadth. For a variety of different reasons, I chose breadth. And at that time, Sudeshna, honestly, like change opportunities were very few and far between. The benefits were not evident to most businesses, leaders, even within consulting. It was seen as a very exclusive, role played by very few. So I chose that very deliberately. And then honestly, it was just a range of very, I'll say entry level kind of roles in the change space. Even though I was a little further along in my career, I'm like, it's okay, I'll, it's my foot in the door. I'll even do minutes of the meeting kind of things, just to be the keeper of the crypt and learn through those experiences, right? There were no certifications around that time, so you couldn't really go and get certified and then automatically start doing some of that work, right? So that's kind of the entry into change. um, and again, I had a set of leaders who were very invested in me becoming a change practitioner, right? So there was a lot of support for that, a lot of sponsorship for that. And then over a period of time, as I really grew into senior levels in consulting, I started to move away from ERP change into more cultural and behavioral change. And it was more internally focused, right? It was more internally focused stuff. And then when I guess at the time I was leaving consulting, again, decision was for me as am I learning, right? And that's something that I ask myself very often. Am I learning something new? Am I having fun? And am I creating the same kind of environment for my teams to do that, right? To learn and have fun. And for me, I felt like I was missing out on the beginning and the end, and the continuation to see something really go live and then revisit it and make it better, right? So I felt like consulting, and that too in an offshore environment, was not giving me that, right? So I chose that moment to move out and move into industry. And then honestly, this role sort of was right time, right place, got published at the right time. And I started out as a org development consultant in Kargil. Within a year, I got promoted to manager, and then now I'm in this global role a year after, right? So it's yeah, that's kind of how I've been. And for me, I don't think the learning is ever going to stop, right? I'm constantly trying to learn about new and old ways of doing things that don't get used a lot, and a lot of that learning comes from my colleagues, people who even the people who report to me, people like all over the place. It's not just industry experts, but people who've been around the block for a really long time and have had these varied experiences. So I think the learning shouldn't ever stop.
I think, like, it shows why the curiosity and innovation comes from. I think right through you've been in roles and you've
Yeah,
enjoyed. I think that keeps you going. And I think change management kind of fits there like beautifully, like you need to innovate. So I think that's like a message for people who feel like, that change management would be just doing projects. It is not, right?
it's not.
From it is so much from your journey. It is evident that, yeah, people who are so curious, people who can innovate, can do wonders in this line, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when I came to Marg, remember, I want to say a few years ago, when I came to Marg to do the certification myself, I, by that point in time, I already had, I think, 11 years of experience in change. But I came to Marg and I was like, okay, I'm going to invest in this for myself, right? And yes, have I used AdCar before on a project? Absolutely. But what am I going to learn that is different and new from this 3-day experience was something that was very critical for me, right?
Hmm.
And I really felt I took a lot away from it, especially from those breakout sessions and things like that, right? I felt I really learned a lot of nuances of even the methodology that I wouldn't have learned before in just applying it through, general knowledge. So I think keeping that mind open to learning all the time is something that has held me in good stead.
So I guess our friends and colleagues who constantly look for something new, this can be an area where they can, because I don't think there will be a dearth of newness in terms of it is there to fall short, as Karan say. Yes, newness is there, but you are not being innovative. So that's so true.
Yeah.
And And I think this has been a wonderful conversation, and I would like you to kind of conclude this by giving your advice or to your to your fellows as to today they are watching you to
Yes.
learn. So what would be those tips you give if they choose a career and change?
I don't I'm going to repeat myself a little bit now, obviously, because it's coming from a place of, passion for the work that I do, right? I think no matter what stage of career you're in, whether you're starting your journey in change management or whether you've been, in it for a decade plus, just keep that learner mindset, right? Keep exploring what is out there. I've already, I mentioned a few resources already. Reach out to me. I'm happy to share with you additional areas where you can really dig in. If you have Gartner subscriptions and things like that, like really spend the time, like every Friday, for example, because the workload is relatively lesser in the morning for me, I spend like a couple of hours just reading. Sometimes it's just casually reading articles in Gartner, HBR, whatever it is, right? Like pick a topic. Like this week my topic is, diversity, inclusion, and diversity, equity, and inclusion in org design, right? So I'm going to spend time reading about that, seeing how different organizations are doing that, right? So whatever it is, keep that learning going, right? And I've said this so many times already: go beyond the method, go beyond the standard toolbox, go beyond the templatized way of doing change, comms, and execution. Go beyond that, right? What can you do to, for example, someone recently taught me about, large scale change, right? What can you do to impact large scale change fairly, quickly, efficiently, bringing that change journey happening at a much more rapid pace? Learn about those things. Keep your mind open, so then your toolbox becomes broader than that just method toolkit, right? It becomes a range of things that you can literally sift through at any point in time and apply it in the context of the problem statement that you're trying to solve for, right? David Rock, I already mentioned, right? Neuro Leadership Institute. David Rock is a great one. Like, there are YouTube videos, just seasons and episodes. They have it, indexed by seasons and episodes. Listen to a few of those. Dr. Leandro Herrero, he has this thing called Viral Change, and he talks frequently about change management. And he like he actually challenges some of the things that are currently out there in the market. Is always great to hear a different perspective of something that you've taken as, this is the baseline, I've accepted it, right? He challenges some of those things, so it's always nice to look at it from different scientific perspectives. Marty Goldberg, he's a mentor and a coach of mine, but also someone who has a podcast. Martin Goldberg, he has a podcast going from this which talks about org development as a whole, and sometimes that goes into change management, right? So whatever you can do, engage in online communities of practice, um, just talk to colleagues to get new ideas and new ways of thinking, but just keep that going. It doesn't matter if you're early in your career or late in it, just keep doing it. So that would be my big, my tips and tricks, so to speak.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this. I think it has been extremely insightful, and the simplicity with which you kind of put the whole thing together of even in spite of experience they did those things, because I feel a lot of people when they are new to a job, they are very set of this, I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do. I think they miss out on a large part of stuff. So I think every job comes with both, right, which we need to do and keep learning. And for coming from a learning company, hearing somebody else say that, I think how it's very rewarding, trust me. And it keeps you going. And I think you need to be different before you demand change from others. You have to change. So, so audience, like, I think it has been an extremely insightful conversation with Nayona. Do write to us as to how you thought about it, and keep watching this space for more. Please join the Mark Change Leader Forum in the following link and be a part of the community. We are hosting various events and various talks with stalwarts like Nayona, who discusses change management and life in general. So please join the community and keep watching them. Thank you.